Welcome to the second session of the Weight Loss Sauce program. This is a program that I usually hold live with a small group, 10-15 patients of mine for 3 months. But I decided to share some of this information with you in this format with the important understanding and disclaimer that whatever I say here is purely for informational and educational purposes. If you plan to make any important decisions regarding your diet, your exercise, your health in general, you need to talk to your primary care provider before you make those changes. So when we talk about the diet, we mean essentially what and how to eat in order to lose weight, right? That's pretty obvious. And today I'm going to start with a quick recap that. And we're going to talk primarily most of the time in this session about what is the optimal diet for weight loss, because there is such a thing, both for weight loss and maintenance. We're going to also go a little bit through some recipe and meal analysis, and then we're going to summarize a few key points and discuss some homework that I usually give my patients at the end of this. First of all, what is the ideal diet for weight loss? And before I spell out the details, I want you to take a moment or two, think about it, and if you want to participate from a distance, wherever you are in the world, you can scan this QR code on your phone. It'll take you to an anonymous form where you can share with me what you think is one or more important features of what an ideal diet for weight loss would be in your opinion. What I'm interested in is what you think an ideal diet that would allow you to lose weight and maintain it should look like. What would be its defining characteristics? Okay? So if you took a moment, you can pause this video and share that with me if you are so inclined. Again, this will be anonymous. Plus, what research shows, what our practice for many, many years shows in terms of what's the best in terms of the diet. First of all, such a diet should be nutrient dense, should have enough nutrients to satisfy our body's needs, right? That's obvious. It should be also light in calories. So while it has plenty of nutrients, so we don't feel deprived, especially we are talking about long-term maintenance for weight loss. We have to have those nutrients, and yet at the same time, such a diet has to be light in calories. And herein lies the important paradox in this topic, because a lot of the diets out there that are presented for weight loss, actually, they fail in provide in one or the other of this. They are either low in calories, but they are also poor in nutrients, such as the very low calorie diets, right? Less than 800 calories per day is really hard to satisfy the nutrient needs, or they are nutrient dense, but then they are also high in calories. So then it's a non-starter, right? Because you can't lose weight with such a diet. So this is a formidable challenge for anybody who wants to put together a diet for weight loss, isn't it? Because it's difficult. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the diets on the market today fail. They achieve success on the long term, on the short term, because they deprive you literally one way or another. They restrict you so much that you lose weight, but sooner or later you get bored, you get tired of that, and then you start to regain the weight. It shouldn't leave you deprived. You should feel like you had enough food to fill your stomach, to not feel hungry all the time. That's a secret of success for long term, isn't it? And then it should be low cost. It shouldn't cost you a fortune to stay on that. It should provide variety. It shouldn't be boring. If you eat the same thing every single day, sooner than later you're going to get bored and you're going to give it up. Should be sustainable long term. That's clear. It would be a healthy diet. This is, again, a very important feature that many of the current weight loss diets on the market lack. They work to lose weight, but when it comes to disease prevention, when it comes to diabetes reversal, when it comes to improving your immunity, they actually are pretty pitiful, most of them. And it should be tasty. It should be something that you actually enjoy. A lot of people give up diets for weight loss primarily because of this issue. They are not so palatable. And after a while, being on a, for example, low carb or keto, Atkins type of diet, it gets so boring that people give up and forget about it. Because to this day and historically, there have been two approaches when it comes to weight loss. Either the typical weight loss diet where you reduce stuff, you cut down, and all the popular diets out there, really, that's what they do. You know, whether it's Atkins, keto, HCG diet, paleo, whatever it is for weight loss, they restrict you, and that's how you lose. Now, the advantage is that the more they restrict you, the quicker you lose weight. So they provide you that instant, almost, gratification. The disadvantage is that they are not sustainable, and so you do this yo-yo where you lose weight, you regain, lose, and that's actually worse for the long term than staying at a stable weight, even if that's an elevated weight. And I want to make, though, a special mention here about intermittent fasting, which is very popular these days. I have a number of patients that have pursued this. Intermittent fasting has distinct advantages because it's cheap. It doesn't cost you any money to eat nothing, right? So it's the cheapest of all weight loss diets. It works. I mean, you're not counting calories. You know, when you fast, you fast. It's not complicated. It's easy in that respect. It's difficult because it's hard to resist the hunger urge and to last enough to lose weight. That's the difficult part of this. And longer term, it's even more difficult. And here I'm not talking about fasting for a long period of time. Intermittent fasting is a fasting that lasts, say, 16 hours a few times a week or 24 hours a couple of times a week. And then the rest of the week, you don't fast. One of the cons that I've noticed in some of my patients, not everybody, with intermittent fasting is that it creates this false sense that, okay, I did my 2 days of fasting per week, now I can indulge and I can eat whatever I want, however I want it, and it doesn't matter. It does matter. There's a separate discussion we can have on that. But apart from this, intermittent fasting can actually be a very good way to lose weight, especially early on when you need more weight loss to happen in a shorter period of time. So I think this is a keeper. Now, when we look at the alternative, the other approach that is successful for the long term, this is a different way to approach this issue altogether. You know, when I was starting this some decades ago and I was trying to help people lose weight, I was trying to fit a peg into a round hole, and it didn't work. And by that, what I mean is I was preparing recipes and menus for a whole day, for a whole week, for people who wanted to lose weight and were coming my way to be helped. As a practicing primary care physician with training in human nutrition, as I mentioned before, I have a special interest in this area, and I had many patients, and I still have, coming to me for those specific reasons. But what I noticed pretty soon was that while people were excited initially because I gave them everything they needed to do, so it was easy and simple, you just follow the script and you'll lose weight. They were excited for a few days, but by the end of the first week, usually, they got bored of my menu because they grew up with different ways of eating. They enjoyed other recipes. They didn't like it, and they gave up. So it didn't work. So nowadays, what I do is I take this approach here where I do what I call diet modification. I start with what they eat, and that's the purpose of that 1 to 2 days food log that I mentioned in the first session. If you haven't watched that, please go back and do that. It'll explain that in a lot more detail. We start from that, and then we improve it, and we make it better and better until it starts to help people lose weight. So that's the approach I'm doing now. Now, we cannot talk about successful weight loss, long-term especially, without mentioning the National Weight Loss Registry. Some of you may be familiar with this. If you are not, look it up. They have a website. I'm going to mention the dietary part of it here only, but very briefly, what is the National Weight Loss Registry? It's a research project that started in the mid-90s, was started by 2 PhDs who had this positive attitude looking at the statistics. You know, if you look to this day at the statistic for weight loss, most weight loss plans on the long term, they fail within the first year or so. 80% fail, in the sense that people give them up, They regain the weight sometimes with a bonus. But what these people did, they said, we're not going to look at the 80% that fail. Let's look at the 10, 20, however percent that are actually successful on the long term. What sets them apart? What makes them succeed? And that's what their project was geared to look at. And so they included people, adults, who have lost at least 30 pounds, kept it off for at least a year. And they have about 10,000 people in their program so far that they've been followed. The maximum they've seen lose some people up to 300 pounds, but the average is 66 pounds for 5.5 years. So I think you'll agree with me. This is some really impressive weight loss that these people have achieved. And here's what I'm going to say about those participants in today's topic. We're going to talk only about the diet. It's actually interesting because if you watch, even here on YouTube, there's a presentation from one of the PhD initial authors of the study. And he goes on and says, look, when it comes to diet, people watch it in the program, but they are successful with any diet they can do. Whatever diet they choose, if they stick with it, they are successful. But then he goes on to say, the only thing we found in that is that they eat a low-calorie diet, about 1,400 calories, although he thinks they underestimate that, and I think he probably is right. And that it is a low-fat diet, 26.6% of energy coming from fat. Well, I think this is a glaring contradiction. I mean, if you say that it doesn't matter what diet these people follow because they'll succeed as long as they stick with it, but then in the next breath you tell me that it's a 26% fat, energy from fat, it's a low-fat diet, this rules out a lot of the low-carb, high-fat, Atkins kind of type of thing of diet, doesn't it? You can't do that with 26% of calories from fat. So I think he needs to sit down and think about this. It's a friendly criticism, okay? I'm a nutritionist, so I care about these things. You can't just be nonchalant about it and say whatever works, it doesn't matter really, as long as you stick with it. And they avoided fast food meals, less than once a week or around there, where they would get something from a fast food outfit. Importantly here, I said that in this program, they were having only 26% of calories coming from fat. In the Western diet, whereas the US or other places in the Western world, in the developed world, the typical person eats about 30 to 35% of their calories in the form of fat. So these folks have dropped their fat intake or the contribution in their total calorie intake by fat by about 5 to 10%. So this is a significant feature of their diet, and I wanted to underline that because we'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment. And just so you understand how these numbers come to be calculated, these are the macronutrient here, the protein, carbs, fat, alcohol. And you see here for protein, carbs, you only have 4 calories per gram of intake, but for fat you have 9 calories. So if you didn't know this should be a huge thing to keep in mind when you eat fat, whatever form it is, even if it's olive oil, cold pressed, whatever pure grade, you still get 9 calories per gram as opposed to sugar, which only gives you 4 grams, or other carbohydrates. I'm not promoting sugar here. I'm just saying we need to be aware of what the numbers are. And also importantly, you've heard of belly, beer belly and all that. Alcohol brings 7 calories per gram. So not to be neglected. Anyway, if you add everything you eat in a day and you break it down, you can see that you could look at, say, a quarter coming from protein and fat and about half from carbs. That's a reasonably balanced way to do it. The numbers are relative depending on so many factors. We're not going to discuss that today, but just to get an idea how you get that 25% contribution from fat into the total calories consumed in a day. I want you to invite to do an analysis of a recipe. Now, this recipe happens to come from a vegan starter kit that the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine puts out. If you scan this QR code over here, you are going to be taken to that page where you can download that. I highly recommend it. The reason I want to look at this particular recipe today with you is simple. I have many patients who have gotten scared of carbs and try to avoid carbs at all cost because they think the carbs will make them fat. And yes, too many carbs will make you fat. There's no question about that. The body doesn't care at the end of the day if your caloric surplus comes from carbs or from fat or even from protein or alcohol. Any excess calorie will be deposited as fat to some extent. But we are not talking here about surplus. We're talking about intake of necessary food for what your body needs. And in that respect, carbs are actually necessary. They are best fuel for muscle, for brain, for a bunch of other tissues. So, you know, going low carb is not the secret of success. You remember in the National Weight Registry, they went low calorie and low fat, not necessarily low carb, okay, for the long term, for maintenance, and even for weight loss. So this recipe here, I included it because it gives you a very generous amount of carb, and I want to show you simply the fact that if you make this recipe, it makes 3 servings here, and these are the ingredients. If you follow that link that I gave you, you'll be able to see how you make. But they are talking about 2 cups of rice. They are talking about 2 cups of sweet potato. They are talking about 15 ounces of black beans. You also have 3/4 of a cup of mango chunks, 2 tablespoons of coconut nectar or maple syrup. So you wonder when you see a recipe like this, man, this thing is loaded with carbs. I bet it's probably 3,000 calories, this whole thing, or how much is it? Well, I did that analysis for you. And even though the text is smaller, I'm going to do my best to blow it up here a little bit so you can see it. Each of the food ingredients that has calories I listed here with its amount and the breakdown in the macronutrients, as you see here, including sugar. And here, most importantly, you see the calories. And indeed, if you look where most of the calories come, you see the rice, you see the black beans, and interestingly, the hemp seeds over there, and the maple syrup, right? Together with the sweet potato over here. So I agree with you that carbs, the more you eat, the more calories come in. But here's the thing. Remember, this is 3 servings. What's the total that this can bring? 1,662 calories. So you divide that by 3, you get about 550 some calories per serving. And this is a pretty complex, rich dish. You know, I don't necessarily enjoy this type of cooking myself. But what I'm trying to say is here, you get to eat a lot. And all you get is 550 calories, which is decent. You know, for somebody who wants to stay below 1,400 calories a day, you still have almost, 900 calories left to work with for that day after you ate a serving of this very rich, kale and grains bowl. But here's the other thing that I'm going to say here. What I do with patients is I try to help them modify and improve their diet. I'm not just telling them, hey, you know what you're eating, just keep going with what you're doing, because there's nothing wrong with it. And I showed you earlier that the most calories in this recipe come from the rice, for example, almost 500 calories. What if instead of 2 cups, you actually drive it down to 1.5 cups? It's 3 servings, so it'll break down nicely into 1/2 cup per serving. And you would be reducing this 500 calories by 120 some calories just by doing that. And I bet it won't taste any different. What if you also reduced this maple syrup? I don't like to put sweet stuff all over the place. To instead of 2 tablespoons to only 1. And you cut this in half, right? And you can do the same with all this even with the hemp seeds, although if it comes to that, I think the hemp seeds here in this particular recipe are good to keep, even though they bring 300 and some calories, because they are loaded with omega-3. And also, as you see here, they are a great source of protein. And so I think I would keep the seeds myself. In any case, this is how I would go about modifying and improving this diet to make it a little bit better, okay? For those of you who say, okay, how about the whole menu? This is just one dish. How can we improve the menu for the whole meal? And I'm trying to show here, this is an inspiration from an older video you can find on my channel. My friend Winston Craig presents this a while ago, and I thought it was interesting, so I included here in a little modified form a typical American meal where you have some salad with dressing, usually mayonnaise-based or something like that, fat-based. and you get 90 calories. You got a slice of bread with some butter, you get 120 calories from that. You get some peas, again, you put some fat on them, right? Some butter, some margarine, again, 120 calories. And then you have an entree, whatever that is, the main part of the meal, with gravy, because gravy tastes good, doesn't it? 240 calories there. You have a half-baked potato with butter, and you get 170 calories there. And you have about 1 cup of chocolate, soy milk. You want to be plant-based, so people go with soy, 210 calories, and an apple pie with a slice of apple pie rather, with some ice cream. And here you get a whopping 500 calories just from that. So just looking at this menu, what strikes you, I'm sure, is this. First of all, you get 1,450 calories. That's almost like your daily limit if you wanted to lose weight, unless you're really, really heavy. So this is a huge red flag here, because in one meal you already ate everything you should have eaten the whole day. So that's not good. And then the second thing you notice here is, why, more than a third of these 1,450 calories come from this dessert, the apple pie, one slice only, not the whole apple pie, with ice cream. So that's a huge red flag right there. This is where you would start to improve this diet. But what you may not be aware of is the fact that everything else here can be improved. And here's how you do it. Instead of the salad having the mayonnaise, you just put some lemon juice or some vinaigrette. And from 90 calories, you drop to 40. Instead of the slice of bread with butter, just eat the bread alone. You have enough in this meal not to have to put butter on that bread. And it drops to 60 all the way from 120. You drop that in half. Same thing with the peas, we drop that in half without the fat added to it. How about you give up the gravy or cut that by, say, 3/4 or eliminate it altogether? You can learn to eat that way if you really want to lose weight. So from 240, you drop to 150 calories. And how about you eat the baked potato by itself? Just 110 calories down from 170. How about the soy milk without the chocolate version, just the regular one, 120 as opposed to 210? I mean, those are big drops and they add up, and it's so easy to see how that happens. Plus, how about you bake the apple alone without the ice cream and the apple pie? Look at this, 90 as opposed to 500, more than 5 times less calories right there. So your your caloric total for this meal drops from 1,450 to 630. I can live with 630. I have room another, 700-800 to eat and still be able to lose weight for that day, right? So this is the way you do it, my friend. You start with what you eat today. You look at your numbers for a few days, and then you trim down to your level of comfort. You don't have to go from 100% to 0. You cut down, and you work on the big ticket items first. That's where the money is. If you manage to drop those 500 calories to 90, you already eliminated 400 calories right there. So you got going big time just by being intentional about where the biggest problem is. Some people have a problem with sweet drinks, with Coke. They can drink a fair amount of that, and that can be an addiction. You have to fight and defeat it. But if you succeed in that, you will be so much better off and easier to lose weight than continuing and try all kinds of fat diets on the side while you don't fix the problem, the essence of the problem. In any case, I hope that this will inspire you to make these changes. I want to end today by presenting to you this image here, which talks about the best diet for weight loss. In my program, when I talk to my patients, and for myself, even for health reasons, I go for a plant-based diet. And I do that for a reason. The reason for that is, remember that slide in the beginning when I discussed the features of an ideal diet for weight loss and maintenance, where I said it should be nutrient-dense, low in calorie, good to prevent disease, tasty, provide variety, feeling so you don't feel hungry. All of these features and more are offered by a plant-based diet, meaning most of the foods, if not all of them, come from plants, and they are as close to their natural state in the sense that you don't refine them. You keep the carbs with the fiber. You don't make and drink the juice only. You eat the full fruit and things like that. And so we'll discuss more in the future, in future sessions about this. But the idea here is that a plant-based diet, the reason it's so good, not just for weight loss and maintenance, is that it also has a positive impact on almost every single comorbidity or health problem associated with obesity. It helps control and reverse diabetes. It helps decrease the cholesterol. It helps the high blood pressure to come down. In fact, the DASH diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, is heavily emphasizing plant foods precisely for this positive effect on the blood pressure. Many people don't realize that. I bet most of you never heard of the DASH diet, even though you may have high blood pressure. The literature, though, is very familiar with the fact that a plant-based diet, such as the one that the DASH diet promotes for the most part, is very beneficial for your high blood pressure. It helps prevent stroke, heart attacks, and cancer. Folks, these things are the top two causes. Cardiovascular disease, which includes strokes and heart attacks, and cancer are the top causes of death in the United States and the Western world. And this type of diet has been proven again and again in hundreds of studies to prevent those things, to help minimize and partially at least reverse them when they are there. So this is really important stuff to keep in mind. It helps reverse fatty liver, which is almost universally present in people who have excessive weight. It helps with acid reflux. And here's an interesting one that I bet you haven't heard so far, and that is it helps with your immune system. And I hinted in the beginning that when people start to try to lose weight, they go on this very depriving, very low calorie diets for extended periods of time, and they lose the weight, but their immune system can suffer because they don't get the nutrients that those immune cells need to thrive and to be strong. We have data, in fact, showing that people who suffer from obesity, from a BMI over 30, have a lower immune resistance, including to COVID. This is one of the reasons why we've seen so much more comorbidities and death from COVID-19 among people who are obese. The reason for that is that in obesity, we have found through research that the stem cells that generate new cells to fight the COVID virus and whatever other viruses are out there, they die younger among the obese. And they run out of those stem cells sooner. This is another reason why people who get very old, into their 90s and beyond, their immune system drops significantly and they are so much more vulnerable. They run out of those stem cells. But this phenomenon is much more accelerated and sooner it happens in people who have obesity. So this is no joking matter. You know, if you want your immunity to be strong, losing weight, bring your weight down is a really, really important aspect in keeping it down. So I want to summarize the key points that I discussed today, and that is, there's 3 or 4 of them. Number 1, an optimal diet for weight loss is a diet that brings 25 or less % of calories from fat. It's a low-calorie diet, and it's a plant-based diet, importantly, which, as I try to explain, is paradoxically non-depriving. You limit yourself by not eating animal foods, and yet is not depriving. And if you doubt that, I want to tell you a little story here. Because when we get used to eating a lot of animal food, we have this fear that I also had when I made the change some decades ago, that, man, I'm going to feel deprived. I'm going to miss those foods. You know, when I was a kid in Romania growing up, I remember my parents and my grandparents, sometimes they made those homemade sausages. You had meat, you would grind it into those hand cranking machines, and it will come out of the other end and go into those sausage containing things. I think they were intestines of some animal or something. It was gross stuff, you know, I wouldn't do that again. But think about that. What does give good taste to those sausages? Is it the meat inside? No, it's the stuff that you mix into that ground meat. You have a lot of spices, you have salt, you have garlic and things like that. And that's what gives it the meat. And all of those things are actually coming from plants. Well, the same is true when you plant a vegetarian diet, a plant-based diet. You know, Think of tofu, for example. If you look at tofu and you try to eat it from the store, it tastes like nothing. Even though I like it even in that state with salad sometimes or something, or a little salt. But it can serve as an ingredient, as a platform that you mix all kinds of spices, all kinds of other ingredients, and you can make whole thing, you can make entrees from it, all the way to desserts and everything in between. And that's what I mean by not feeling deprived. There is a lot of variety in plant foods, and you can use your imagination. The sky's the limit of what you can do to make it appealing, satisfying, varied, and pleasant, tasty, right? Now, the second principle here in terms of diet is that you need to start with what you eat today and work on your favorite recipes and go from there to improve them. And the important thing to keep in mind is the way you improve them, you start to cut down on fats and added sugars. That's where the money is. Number 3, give yourself time. You can't do this overnight. You need time to learn and get comfortable and make progress in this area. And number 4, along the same lines, this is a skill that needs to happen for the rest of your life if you have a propensity to put on weight. Weight loss is not a temporary 3 months, 6 months deal and then you are done, you are good to go. It's a lifelong skill that you have to acquire. And those who are successful watch what they eat, among other things, long term. What I would like you to do as homework, if you want to participate in this, is to look at your favorite recipes. Everybody has a number of favorite recipes that we cook over and over again. Analyze them along the lines that I showed you earlier and see where the problem ingredients are or the problem recipes are, and try to trim them down, try to improve them. Continue using that weight and exercise monitoring I mentioned last time, and continue your exercise routine to burn those 250 or 500 calories a day, depending on your goal. And if you did this, I think you will be successful. In any case, I appreciate your feedback as always. If you want to take a moment and scan this code and give me an anonymous feedback on the form that this code will lead you to, I'd appreciate that. Any suggestions? And even more importantly, if you like and share this video, if you comment in the section below and share your experience with me, your questions and suggestions, I'd really appreciate that. And it'll help promote this material, which I think could be useful for other people to watch. Till next time, you, my friend, stay healthy and stay wise and stay slim.